Hey, what's up, everybody? Welcome to the Rules of Engagement. As always, I'll be your host, Nick axslav, ranish, as we explore strategies and tactics used in the game of Starcraft 2. Today, we're going to look at a series from the MLG Winter Championships Round 1 between Leenock and BabyKnight. Of course, Leenock went on to win this series, but there's a lot of cool ZVP and PvC play that was illustrated in these games. We're going to kind of go through them a little bit slower and point them out both in games 1, 2, and 3. And then after we look at those games, there's going to be a viewer Q&A. So you can submit your questions that you want answered to me on Twitter at axslav. Also, you can leave questions on the YouTube comments, and I'll take questions from YouTube comments as well. So youtube.com/official MLGSC2 is your source for all of our YouTube videos. If you post a question in the comment section of any of the Rules of Engagement videos, I'll go ahead and answer those. So moving on to our first section, Leenock vs. BabyKnight, game number 1. I want to talk about Gateway Expands PvZ, because BabyKnight really likes them. A lot of the European Protoss' favorite Gateway Expands. Talk a little bit about how they affect things. And we're talking about 2-base teching in Zerg vs. Protoss. That's something a lot of Zerg players think is gimmicky and you can't really do it. So we'll talk about some of the differences and how it's a little bit different in Heart of the Swarm than it was in Wings of Liberty. And then we're going to talk about Nidus play in the mid and late game. So not like some weird cheesy Nidus all-in, which is actually can be really cool. Leenock does those really well. But just some integrating Nidus into a more standard game. So we're here over at the 3-minute mark, starting very early in this game. And that's because we want to talk a little bit about Gateway Expand. So Protoss says Gateway Expand. What's the difference? Well, they have the capability to get a Stalker and a Mothership Core out much faster. Mothership Core can deal with Queens. The Stalker, though, slow Zerglings and Queens are not that great against a Stalker. Spine Crawler can't move around. So it's great if you're Leenock, right? As soon as you scout your opponent has no expansion, you start that gas, right? The reason why you start that gas is because you want to get speedings up as soon as possible. The reason why is because they can harass you with Stalkers. They won't always do so, but if they do, it's really great to have that speed upgrade done so you can help control the map. If they send early units out to attack you, your speedings can deal with those very easily, try to get a surround. Against Zealots, even slow Zerglings can usually get the surrounds and kill them off, depending on how many Zealots there are. But against Stalkers, that's where you really need those speedings. And also just to scout your opponent's front, tell exactly what they're doing. So going forward from here, we're going to see that Leenock, what's fairly common for a lot of Zergs to go speedings and third base against this type of Gateway Expand. Leenock's not even going to go for that third base quite yet. Instead, he's going to continue to mine gas even after he starts speed upgrade. And he's going to use that gas to go straight to a lair, right? So we're going to see him actually teching lair over this natural. So what he's doing is he's playing a 2-base tech build, Zerg vs. Protoss. And why is he doing this? Well, some people occasionally did 2-base tech builds in Wings of Liberty. The reason why they weren't so popular is pretty simple. The reason why they weren't so popular is because you're going to fall behind economically speaking. In Wings of Liberty, is one of the Zerg's strongest units throughout the majority of the mid-game was the Roach. You can build Roaches without teching to lair, but if you take the third base early, you'll have a lot of economy, and that'll really help you build a whole lot of Roaches. In Heart of the Swarm, the Roach is not nearly as important of a unit, because the Roach is countered by Time Warp. It's also countered by Force Fields, so it can't do quite as much as it could in Wings of Liberty. Of course, there's Force Fields in Wings of Liberty, but Time Warp with an overcharge, Mothership Core is a fine unit. These are things that make the Roach a lot weaker in Heart of the Swarm, so most Zerg players avoid them. If you're going to avoid the Roach, there's not too much you can do on Hatchery Tech. Now, you can still play 3-base before lair. That's totally fine. Most Zergs still do it. But because Roaches are weaker, and if your opponent pressures you, you're often forced into getting Roaches with a 3-base before lair build. The 2-base then lair actually has a little bit more merit now in Heart of the Swarm because it allows you to always reliably skip Roaches. You can go speeding straight to Hydralisk, get a couple spines if you need to against mass gateway aggression. So going forward in this game, we're going to see he did 2-base tech, right? BabyKnight's trying to do some pressure here. And early pressure in Protoss vs. Zerg is really awesome because you have this recall ability that the Mothership Core has. So if you keep it with your army, you can use Hallucination, scare the Zerg. By the time they realize they're fake, you can get in there, kill third base, and get out. Unfortunately, if you miss the recall in time, you're gonna lose the forces. That was kind of a tough choice for BabyKnight. If he recalled, he wouldn't kill the hatchery. Although ideally, you should have the Mothership Core further back. Then you could have gotten both. So he loses, 4 sentries. He kills the hatchery. It probably puts him a little bit behind, right? And then because he doesn't have the sentries, he's got a much harder time taking his expansion. But going forward, let's force you to the next part of the game. What happens is, Leenock puts on a little bit of pressure with Hydralisk. BabyKnight defends with Stalkers. Hydralisk gets pushed back. BabyKnight says, okay, now I can take the expansion. And it kind of equalizes into a relatively normal game here, right? I mean, the Zerg's up by about 20 supply. Protoss' third is on the way. Zerg's third is just now was actually saturated. It was coming up before then. And it's relatively normalized. Now, Leenock is going for Swarm Hosts. And one thing that's cool about Swarm Hosts is they can work so well on their own, but also with the right support, they're even more effective. So notice some things Leenock does. It's one, of course, to get speedlings, because if you're a Zerg, you should always have speedlings just to supplement your army. But he also got 2 infestors. Now, he didn't waste resources on pathogen glands. The reason why it would have been a waste is because he's only getting 2 infestors. It's not worth getting pathogen glands if you're not going to make at least I'd say about 6 infestors. Then it becomes worth it. Maybe 5 or maybe even 4. Probably somewhere in 5 or 6. He's just getting 2 infestors to help control the mobility of Blink Stalkers. And then combined with Locust, he can really get a lot of kills, right? So for now, he's just sending Locust. He's building up. What are some other things he's doing to go well with his Swarm Host? Well, one is look how fast he went to Hive. Very, very, very fast Hive. And this is something that's extremely important, and I actually want to address, is how fast he got Hive is insanely important in Heart of Swarm. So many Zergs make the mistake of not teching Hive very fast. And the reason why they don't tech Hive so fast is because they want to get the Spire to support their play, right? They say, okay, I'm getting Swarm Hosts. I need to get a lot of Swarm Hosts. I need to make sure I can protect them from air, so I need to get Hydralisk. I need to make sure I can protect them from Colossi, so I get Corruptors. But you can skip the Spire. The Hive tech is cheaper than a Spire. It takes just as long to build. And Vipers are astronomically better than Corruptors against Colossi. They're way better. A couple of Vipers is so much more effective than a couple of Corruptors. And even if you make mistakes on the Abducts and Blinding Clouds, you're going to have a couple tries. Like, imagine we could do it with 10 Vipers as opposed to a whole bunch of Corruptors, right? And you don't even need 10. You just make like 4 and you're set. And you don't have to spend as many resources. Of course, they are more gas intensive. And then if you're worried about airplay, that's where you should be using Queens and Spores. Maybe get a few Hydras from the start if you need to, but really, you don't want to make Hydralisk. They're kind of expensive. Their stats aren't good. You really want to be using Queens and Spores for your anti-air, because those are both minerals only. They both have insane combat stats, and they're much more mobile than people think. As long as you get the Queens can also ready to creep. Queens on creep move at speed 2.5, which isn't bad. And Spores are like 1.5, which is slow, but it's like battle cruiser speed, right? So they actually can cross around and move at a decent rate, enough to keep up with your opponent's air movements as long as you can cut them off. So that's really cool, the fast Hive. The other thing he does is he's getting a Nidus network, right? So you can see that. Now, what's cool about the Nidus network is that the Nidus allows for multiple things, right? It both provides a retreat path for the Swarm Host, which is really awesome. You can put it by your Swarm Host location. If your opponent breaks through the Locust and you weren't paying attention, so you didn't retreat the Swarm Host in time, you can then pull those Swarm Hosts out through the Nidus Canal. It also allows you to make use of your speedlings, right? You have all these extra minerals, or a lot of times you do. Sometimes you're spending early on, like right now, you're spending minerals on getting expansions and drones. In fact, Leenock actually didn't even have that many drones, only 67. But a lot of Zergs will be up to 80 drones, and then they'll have a lot of mineral surplus. And those minerals, if you have Nidus Network, you can integrate some Nidus Speedling Harass. It's not that great, because Speedlings come out slow, and most of the time your opponent will react in time. But it's not terrible. It's something to think about. You can even put like a Nidus Canal right here. You can do a lot of cool stuff. But also, the main thing is it provides a retreat path for the Swarm Hosts. And not just retreating back to your base, right? You can have one Nidus Canal right here. And then you put another Nidus Canal, like I said, maybe right here, actually more likely back here in this area. And then what you can do is you send the Locusts out, right? Once your Locusts see your opponent, like right now, you're like, okay, my opponent is going to be defending this location. Right now, you still have, look at your Swarm Hosts, you still have, a good amount of cooldown remaining, right? Actually, some of them are different. Yeah, some of them, he didn't actually link up his summons very well. But right when you see them and you're halfway done, you can pick up these Swarm Hosts, pull them in the Nidus, pop them out around this area, and your next wave can go to the natural. And you can do it much faster than you could without the Nidus because you don't have time to move your army all the way down here to hit that same Locust cooldown. But you do have time if you use the Nidus. So that's the cool thing. Now, back to the thing about the Vipers. Is the reason why they're so much better than Corruptors is because, one, 3 Vipers, right? This is the same gas cost as 6 Corruptors, but it's really much cheaper because 6 Corruptors cost 900 minerals instead of 300 minerals in the Vipers. And so you have a lot more minerals to play with for your speedlings, for your expansions. But let's just say you had 6 Corruptors instead of 3 Vipers here. 6 Corruptors could not have come in here and killed the 2 Colossi. At best, it would have killed 1 before the Stalkers killed them. There's enough Stalkers there that Corruptors couldn't have done too much. But the Vipers have long range, and you don't need 6 of them there. You don't need 9 of them, whatever. All you need is 3, and you can abduct the Colossi. And even if it wasn't a great abduct, right, because you don't have that many Locusts, they can pull back. What can you do? You can just abduct them again. Yoink. Remember, each Viper has 2 abducts, right? Abduct costs 75 energy, right? So your Viper has 2 abducts, and then with this short consume time, it'll have a 3rd one up very soon. And in fact, if you're longer, you can use that consume to catch it up to full again. Can have even more than that. So, but minimum of 2 abducts. And a Viper is cheaper than a Colossi, so even if it takes you 2 abducts, you're still just trading your Viper energy for a unit that costs more than the Viper itself. So they're amazing against Colossi, and be sure to use them. You can see here, Leenock actually made the mistake on that first abduct. And on the second abduct, he even doesn't, it's not that great either, but he can use a 3rd. So 5 abducts for 2 Colossi, that's a great trade. Who cares if a couple abducts, took a couple tries? It doesn't matter. Because the amount of cost it's costing Zerg to Protoss, it's still massively in Zerg's favor, right? Maybe you have to blow up one of your Spore Colors. Big deal. You just killed 2 Colossi, right? Which are both 300 minerals and 200 gas each. So they're very, very expensive units. So that's pretty cool. And then the one thing that is cool about the Nidus is their retreat path. And as you can see here, or he's not doing it quite yet, you can reposition it very well. So you're coming in pressuring for this angle. He's actually moving closer to try to kill this Nexus. And of course, with the Locust waves, he's going to do it. And then at a certain point, Protoss says, okay, I think I have enough. See more abducts there. Pretty good. Even if you don't kill the Colossus, you weaken enough. It's not bad. Eventually, the Protoss, typically they play patient until they get to a certain point. They're like, okay, now I can take on these Storm Hosts, and they're going to push out and try to kill them. And that's where the Nidus play can really help. So right here, this is when ideally you'd be backing your guys up through the Nidus, because the Protoss could jump on you. Of course, in this case, he has a counterattack, so it's okay. But if you don't have a counterattack, you want to make sure that Nidus play is there. And if a Nidus play isn't there, while a game can be going great for a while, all of a sudden, all your Storm Hosts can easily die, right? Like right here, as soon as this wave happens right here, and you can tell they're going to plow through it, you can lift up your Swarm Hosts and pack them back up in the Nidus, and you should be able to get away. They can blink, take 1 or 2, but because you have to run across the whole map, you're safe. Unfortunately, Leenock doesn't, I guess he doesn't care about his guys, so we didn't do that. But the idea of having a Nidus who can easily supplement it is great. Not to mention, Nidus can help you bring Queens to the front, can help your reinforces from your base. It's a point to spread creep from. Just a great all-around utility. So, I mean, this game goes on for a bit because while Leenock's doing some good damage here and he's canceled his Nexus, he also did just donate, like 100 food for nothing, and he's at 150 now because he's been able to put more in the production cycle. But eventually, he remaxes an Ultra and Infestor. And Ultra Infestor is an insanely strong late game Zerg versus Protoss tech switch, because in Heart of the Swarm, to counter Ultras as a Protoss, you need either a lot of air units or a lot of Immortals. And both of those are hard to get up very quickly. So if you're a Zerg player, always, if it's a late game, have that Ultras Cavern ready. So if you're doing a composition like Swarm Hosts, you're doing a composition like Mutalisk, and your opponent's heavily Blink, Soccer Storm, Colossi, switching very fast into Ultralisk with, you need Infestors, the fungal growth. Ultralisk and Infestors is very good because even if your opponent sees it and has time to produce 2 Immortals, 2-3 Void Rays, it's not going to be enough. They really need a lot of Immortals or Void Rays to react. So Leenock uses that tech switch to Ultras and clobbers the mainly Stalker, Colossi, Archon army. And the reason that works is because now Ultralists beat Archons in Heart of the Storm. They did it, and they should. They should be useful against Archons. So that was a good change, and it's a great tech switch. Utilize that in your play. This wraps up the analysis of game number 1 between Leenock and BabyKnight. Take a short break and be on to game number 2.